Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. Georgia is still searching for their first national title since 1980. And this may be Kirby Smart's best team yet to finally break through and end that national title drought. So guys, again, welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, here to break down the Georgia Bulldogs. We are breaking down Georgia, predicting and analyzing their schedule for this 2021 college football season. As always, first off, make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe. Second off, make sure to check out everything down in the description below. Make sure to go sign up for those expert picks. We're just a few weeks out from the start of the season. We've got college football and NFL spread picks over on our website, thegridironexpert.com. So sign up for those today before the season starts. And also make sure to check out Prize Picks. We have all the info and the links for Prize Picks down in the description as well. Sign up using our promo code GRIDIRON, and we will be your personal consultant all year long. So make sure to go give that a look. So let's take a look at the Bulldogs, guys, a team that went 8-2 last year, failed to win the SEC East. That crown went to Florida, but went 8-2 last year, still made the Peach Bowl and defeated Cincinnati in what was one of the better bowl games of the 2020 postseason. But you look at this team, guys, anything less than a playoff appearance for Georgia is going to be viewed as a disappointment because so much talent returned on this team, and it all starts for me on the offensive side of the ball with their quarterback, JT Daniels. Georgia finally has a capable quarterback to lead this offense. No disrespect really to Jake Fromm, who played well with the Bulldogs, but he was nowhere near the caliber of JT Daniels, a guy that threw for over 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions in 4 starts. And let me back that up with some facts here. We mentioned Jake Fromm and how he didn't play poorly, helped Georgia get in position multiple times to win a national title or contend for the SEC. But put this into perspective. Prior to JT Daniels, Georgia only had 4 300-yard passing games under Kirby Smart. Prior to JT Daniels, 4 300-yard passing games. JT Daniels strolls in, starts 4 games for Georgia last year, and has 2 300-yard passing games. 4 in what, 4 or 5 years? JT Daniels in 4 games throws for 2 300-yard games. It's unreal. It's unbelievable. So he's finally the guy that can come in and transform this offense, really give Todd Monken's offense a huge boost. Finally, a quarterback for Georgia that can spread the field, hit a deep ball, make Georgia not so one-dimensional, because we always know that with Kirby Smart, they want to run the ball, and they're still going to do that. They return all their rushing production from last year, led by Zamir White, 779 yards last year, and JT Daniels, on top of having his rushing attack back, they're going to have plenty of pass catchers to help him out. Namely, let's add in Arik Gilbert, who finally settled on a home after committing to LSU, now moving over to Georgia, will give this Bulldogs team a huge boost. So the offense is looking great. Same could always be said for the defense. Defense is always strong down in Athens for Kirby Smart. They had the #1 defense in the country, or #1 rushing defense, I should say. One of the top defenses, period. #1 rushing defense in the country, allowing 72.3 rushing yards per game. They ranked 12th nationally in total defense, 321 yards per game. The one weak point, if you want to call it that, for Georgia was their secondary. Kirby Smart recognized that, went out and added 2 fantastic transfers. Derion Kendrick coming in from Clemson, Tykee Smith coming in from West Virginia. Both of them there to boost that secondary and give it some extra depth and talent. Georgia, from top to bottom, is going to have one of the best defenses in the country once again. It's going to be a matter of whether or not they can get that crucial win over Clemson in Week 1. Can that defense lead them to that crucial victory over Clemson in Week 1? That's the million-dollar question. So we take a look at the schedule, and we'll start with that game in Charlotte. That's the biggest game of the year, guys. Changed my mind. You can make cases for other conference games. You can make cases for other non-conference games across the country. But in Week 1, we're going to get a top 4, should be a top 4 matchup between the Tigers and the Bulldogs. And again, it doesn't make or break anybody's playoff hopes here. If Clemson were to lose, they are going to be the favorite to run the table the rest of the way. So a loss for Clemson, they're still in the playoff more than likely, because they probably will run the table. Georgia, if they lose, obviously their playoff hopes aren't over. SEC title hopes aren't over, but we know the SEC is much more difficult than the ACC. We also know that Georgia more than likely might have a date with Alabama in the SEC championship game as compared to Clemson, who might have to play, who knows, North Carolina, Miami. Not to dog on those 2 teams, but Georgia has the much more difficult road ahead if they were to drop this game. The room for error would be much smaller than it would be for Clemson. When we take a look at this game, guys, both these teams are going to have amazing passing games. I mean, JT Daniels, as we just mentioned, and then you've got DJ Uiagalelei at Clemson. And say what you want about him. Many people think he's overrated. We're not expecting him to be the next Trevor Lawrence in his first year as a full-time starter for Clemson. But what we saw last year in the game against Boston College and Notre Dame, this guy's the real deal. And he has tons of talent coming back. So for me, it's really which defense steps up. Which defense shuts down the other team's passing game. And many would be quick to say that it would be Georgia with the additions of Tykee Smith, with the addition of Derion Kendrick, and just their defense as a whole. But I think Clemson's defense is up there as being just as good as the Bulldogs. The last time we saw Clemson's defense, they got torched by Ohio State in the playoff. And that's everybody's last memory of this defense, which means everybody thinks Clemson's going to look the exact same way when they come out on September 4th in Charlotte. That's not true. Despite the horrible performance against Ohio State, Clemson still had the 15th ranked defense in the country last year, and they returned 10 starters now from that defense. Clemson's defense is loaded. I believe the defensive margin between these two teams is very, very slim. Could really go either way. Could make a case that Georgia owns the slight offensive edge with JT Daniels. Could make that case, but I have faith in DJ Uiagalelei to get the job done. I have faith in Dabo Swinney and Brent Venables, the best defensive mind in the game, to get this job done. And in a game that I believe comes down to the final seconds, we're going to pick the Tigers to win in Charlotte. So Georgia drops 0-1, but it's okay. Everybody wants this win. Obviously, you want this win, but everything, all their goals, all their hopes are still intact. Georgia, if they come into this game ranked at 4th and it's super close, they might drop to 5th. They might drop to 6th. There's not going to be a drastic change in the rankings for the Bulldogs. We can probably run through the rest of their schedule pretty quickly here because, as we mentioned, they are expected to run the table. Georgia very well could be favored in every game, and if they're not favored in all of them, the one they won't be favored in is against Clemson. So yes, they're going to beat UAB 1-1. They then take on South Carolina. They beat the Gamecocks 45-16 last year. I love Shane Beamer at South Carolina. He's a great coach, a great guy, got a lot of swag. He's going to do well in Columbia, but he's not coming on the road and defeating the Bulldogs in Athens. Again, South Carolina's main workhorse this year is Kevin Harris, their running back. Rushed for over 1,100 yards and 15 touchdowns. I don't really have much faith in the South Carolina passing attack. So if all the Gamecocks can really do is run the ball, and they're going up against the number 1 rushing defense in the country from last year, probably not going to bode well for Shane Beamer and his squad. Again, they lost 45-16 last year. A couple of years ago, we saw South Carolina stroll into Athens, pull up an upset. It's not going to happen this year. Georgia 2-1. They cruise past Vanderbilt, arguably the worst team in the SEC this year. New head coach in Clark Lee. Going to take a long time to build that program up. So Georgia 3-1. They then take on Arkansas to kick off October. And if you look again at Georgia's schedule, obviously the East as a whole is relatively favorable to them. But their cross-division games aren't difficult either. They drew Arkansas again out of the West, and they drew Auburn. They didn't draw Alabama, A&M, LSU, not even Ole Miss. Many people think they could be very solid this year. So they drew Arkansas and Auburn out of the West, which is very favorable for Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs. Well, they played Arkansas last year, beat them 37-10 in Fayetteville. That was the season opener for the SEC. But keep in mind that Arkansas was leading that game midway through the third quarter. The Razorbacks were beating Georgia midway through the third quarter and then ultimately collapsed. Georgia absolutely was the better team there. Many people believe that Arkansas could be a trap game for the Bulldogs, and if the game was in Fayetteville, I might say it's possible because the Razorbacks are going to take a step forward, but not in Athens. Not in Athens. The Razorbacks gave up over 190 rushing yards per game last year. I could see this game being just like last year. The Razorbacks are close. It's close at halftime. It's close in the third quarter, but the Bulldogs are going to pull away. They will beat the Razorbacks. I do believe they beat Auburn on the Plains. They're going to win that game. They won 27-6 last year and won that game with Stetson Bennett. And kind of like we mentioned in our Auburn video, look, you can make the argument that Georgia is going to be better than they were last year. They beat Auburn by 21 last year. So you can make the argument that Georgia will be better. You can make the argument that Auburn could be worse. They lose their top pass catchers. Bo Nix is still Bo Nix. Tank Bigsby's there, that's great, but again, Georgia's rushing defense. You really think Tank Bigsby's going to exploit that? Probably not. Auburn's got a lot of changes going on. They've got Brian Harsin as a new head coach, new defensive coordinator, new coordinators, period, new schemes. Yes, they get to host the Bulldogs here, but I just don't have faith in Auburn to do much against the elite teams in the SEC in 2021. I think it's going to kind of be a rebuild year for Brian Harsin, if you want to call it that. Georgia won by 21 last year. Would not be surprised at all to see the margin of victory be about the same this year, despite the game being at Jordan-Hare Stadium. So now they are, 5-0? Or 5-1? They take on Kentucky. Kentucky's a team that can hang. Kentucky, they're a gutsy team. They only fell to Georgia 14-3 last year because of their defense. And that was the problem we saw here. Kentucky's defense was great. That was before we saw JT Daniels too, granted. So Georgia wasn't playing JT Daniels at this time. But Kentucky's defense kept Georgia in check. The Wildcats couldn't get anything going offensively because they didn't have a passing game. All they could do was really run the ball. And again, Georgia's run defense was so stout last year. It's going to be so stout again this year. If you want to beat the Bulldogs, you have to have balance, and you really need to have a capable quarterback that can win the game through the air for you. Kentucky's trying that. They're trying that with Will Levis coming in from Penn State. They're trying that with a new offensive coordinator, trying to be a little bit more balanced, not so run-centric. But again, the game in Athens, Georgia should cruise past the Wildcats by more than 11 this year. They get their bye week going into the Florida game, the one that very well could determine the SEC East. It did last year. It was one of the most highly anticipated games of 2020, and I wouldn't say it lived up to the hype because Georgia laid an egg. Florida exploited this Georgia team, beating them 44-28. But again, Georgia did not have JT Daniels. They did not start using JT Daniels to the very end of the year. Remember, he only had 4 starts last year. I'm not saying the Bulldogs would have won that game over the Gators had JT started because Florida was a dang good team. But we do need to keep that in mind. Don't use last year's result as a reason that you might pick the Gators this year. Because the Gators are not going to win this year in Jacksonville. At the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, Georgia will beat Florida. The Gators lose too much. Kyle Trask is gone. Kyle Pitts is gone. Kadarius Toney, Trayvon Grimes, all gone. And Florida's defense was horrendous last year. Do we think it improves? Yes. Do I think Emory Jones can get the job done against this Georgia defense? No, I don't. I think the Gators fall. Georgia wins this game against Florida, and with that, again, controls their own destiny in the SEC East. They own the tiebreaker against arguably their toughest competition within the division, and you look at the month of November for them, and it's a breeze. Missouri, Tennessee, Charleston Southern, and Georgia Tech. 2 conference games left against middle-of-the-pack teams in the SEC, and then 2 non-conference games, one against an FCS team. They beat Missouri at home. They won 49-14 last year. A lot of people had that as an upset pick. Missouri had just cracked the top 25, so it was a top 25 showdown in Columbia. Everybody thought, hey, Missouri's going to give them a run for their money. JT Daniels torched them. JT Daniels torched them. This Georgia offense, period, torched Missouri, and it showed, hey, Eli Drinkwitz, you're doing good, but you're not on our level yet. You're not ready to compete against the big dogs. Missouri is going to be the same thing for them this year. With the game being in Athens, I really don't see the Tigers having much of a chance here now against the Bulldogs. Wait a minute, they won by 35 last year? I think it's going to be a similar result this year. I think they have a field day against Tennessee. I'm not expecting a horrible year for Tennessee, but they're going to struggle to make a bowl game. Josh Heupel coming in as a new head coach. Everybody thinks because he's such a great offensive mind, Tennessee is going to have a great offense right off the bat. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. You're going to have talent for that to happen. Tennessee doesn't have that right now. Rebuilding year, maybe a few years period in Knoxville, Tennessee will struggle. Georgia will cruise to victory in Neyland Stadium. They won 44-21 last year. I think they'll take care of business again. They annihilate Charleston Southern, which means they go into their final game at 10-1 at Georgia Tech. And again, kind of like we've mentioned with a handful of these other teams, the Yellow Jackets just don't have the offensive or defensive capability to hang with the Bulldogs. Georgia has won 3 straight in this series. They've outscored the Yellow Jackets 135-35 in those 3 games. Jeff Collins and the Yellow Jackets are getting there. We said that all the way back in our ACC predictions, the first conference we predicted. They're getting there. Might flirt with a bowl game this year. But they certainly don't have anywhere near the talent, the speed, the size to hang with Georgia. And it might be a few years before they do. So the Bulldogs win this game comfortably against the Yellow Jackets, a heated rivalry game. They're going to be 11-1. The lone loss to Clemson all the way back in September. So 11-1, which means that we'll set up a date with Alabama, most likely, in the SEC championship game, and that could determine what happens for Georgia. Are they going to go to the playoff? Will they have a shot at making the national championship, ending that title drought that we mentioned, have not won a national title since 1980? They beat Alabama, they're absolutely in. If they lose, their only losses would be to Alabama and Clemson, two teams that would more likely be in the playoff. You can't help but wonder what the committee might do in that type of situation. So it's going to be a very, very interesting year for Georgia. The tone will be set right after week 1. But again, win or lose that game, all their hopes, all their sights, everything they want is still right in front of them. They can still achieve it. But that game in week 1 is going to be one of the biggest games in recent college football memory, 100%. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos. And like we mentioned, check out everything down in the description below. Sign up for those expert picks over on our website, thegridironexpert.com. Sign up before the season starts. Week 0 starts on August 28th. You do not want to miss out on that. So sign up for those. Check out Prize Picks. Use our promo code GRIDIRON over there. We'll help you out every step of the way. And again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. And we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.